All right, so we are now going to be covering Chapter 10, Empathic Confrontation. And confrontation is one of those things that, whether you like it or not, it's going to happen in your life. It's going to happen in your career. It's hard to practice confrontation in role plays. I apologize, my allergies are going crazy today. But it's hard to practice it. And I hope you guys try it out a little bit as you start to role play with each other, and in your future videos. People that are role playing with us don't want to be overly confrontational themselves and put you in a tough spot. So it can be difficult to practice it. But nevertheless, it is something that does happen in your life. As a counselor down the road, it will happen. Confrontation will happen. And it should, because sometimes we have to get a little bit tougher with our clients. It shouldn't be that we're just kind of listening to them talk with no purpose or with no reason, no goal, or, whenever it comes to confrontation, typically it's, you can kind of feel that it's coming sometimes, right? If a client has been saying that they're going to be doing things, they're going to do the homework assignments that you're giving them, they're going to be journaling, and then they don't follow up on the things that they said that they would. At some point, you have to, as part of the job, call them out on it, basically. So part of what confrontation is this rolling with resistance, okay? Clients are resistant for a reason. If you think about the behavior change that maybe you pondered on day one, it's one thing to say, like I said before in my welcome message, it's one thing to say, yeah, sure, I'm going to change and I'm going to do it this way and in this amount of time, and everything is going to be fine during the process. It's another thing to actually implement some type of change. It's easier to stay static in our habits. It's harder to change patterns of behavior, right? So we have to be understanding of that. And that's where that reframing comes in, and those attending skills, the listening skills come in, summarizing and paraphrasing come in, because oftentimes what we are doing by using some of those micro skills are reflecting back to our clients these discrepancies that we're hearing, right? And it can be discrepancies within a story that they're telling us. It could be a discrepancy between, like if you're looking at slide 4, just kind of follow along with me here. Kind of these internal conflicts between statements that a client might be making, between statements and their behaviors, things aren't lining up there, between statements and nonverbal behaviors. But again, make sure that you're always keeping cultural aspects that might be relatively important to consider when it comes to conflict in the back of your mind, because sometimes nonverbal behaviors especially might be a reflection of a cultural background versus a point of conflict, essentially. And then there's external conflicts. And again, this is another area where we have to be mindful of social justice principles and practices, because sometimes these external conflicts, like if it's a situational conflict or between your client and another person that's not your client, some of those things can be caused by society to a larger degree rather than something that your client may or may not be doing. So conflicts are difficult. Nobody, and again, I think I mentioned this when I touched on conflicts a couple of weeks ago, or whenever it was. I lost total track of time here. But conflicts are not yelling at your client. It's not belittling a client. It's not, making fun of something that they're doing or not doing. But conflicts are not even getting to a point where you're arguing with a client. That's not empathic confrontation, right? And conflict within a counseling relationship. But it's hard for new counselors to do that. So be easy with yourself, okay? If, you feel like you've missed a point where you could call out, that there's a discrepancy in between what a client's doing and what a client's saying or how they're acting. There's some examples that I've given throughout this PowerPoint presentation on what confrontation might sound like, things that you might say. I personally like the help me understand opening, right? Help me understand. Why is it that, I'm hearing that you really want to find a job, but, we've gone over how to do a resume and you said you're going to bring it in, but I'm still not seeing a resume, and we really can't get past, get to the next step and reaching your goal of employment if I don't have a resume. So help me understand what's holding you back from doing that. That's a kind of a good opener for that. Where's the other, like, different processes, right? So looking at moving forward and looking at slide 9, different processes to address where a client might be, right, in the whole change process. So there are do's and don'ts when it comes to conflict, and it can be an easy, it can be unsettling. Now there is true conflict. I mean, you haven't lived until you've had a client yell at you for something that you have nothing to do with and nothing that you can change. You will get yelled at by a client. If you are surprised by that, okay, surprise, a client will yell at you sometime in the future, and you will just have to kind of sit there for a second and take it. But that's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about conflict and in confrontation. So Carl Rogers, if you haven't heard of Carl Rogers before, he is the founder of person-centered theory, which is a theoretical orientation, one of many that are out there, but one that's very old. And he used certain techniques. And if I'm trying to think of when I showed the video, I think I show a video maybe lecture, if not in 606, because there's a whole module on Carl Rogers and person-centered theory. So person-centered theory, he gets real close and personal with his clients, but it is kind of the core of talk therapy and what we think of when we think of talk therapy. Carl Rogers was brilliant. He allowed his clients to just speak freely, basically. He highly stressed to like the nth degree, the importance of being non-judgmental. So when you hear the terms unconditional positive regard, empathic understanding, all of that goes back to Carl Rogers and person-centered theory. Now, don't try to sit in person-centered theory and think, well, this is just me taking a back seat and my client's going to talk for 45 minutes and I'm not going to say anything and I'm practicing person-centered therapy. That's not what it is. There are still reflective statements, but there's not as much redirection, focus on a concrete goal type work with person-centered theory. So it's a really great theory for you to kind of look at as a novice counselor, as somebody who's new to the field, because it does allow you and remind you that, sometimes we have to really be working hard to have that unconditional positive regard for our clients, especially when we're new to the profession. So why are we hesitant to confront clients? Well, because we always know what happens afterwards, right? So if we're going to be reflecting back to our clients that there's some type of discrepancy in their actions or behaviors or both, we know the end result is going to be that they're going to kind of their defenses are going to come up, right? That's natural. That's what we do as humans. Clients don't like it because we're basically calling them out and saying, yeah, you're not putting in the work that you said you were going to put in. And you as the counselor should never be working harder than your client. Always, please remember that. You should never be working harder than your client. Your client is there to do the work. You're there to help facilitate the process. So clients don't like confrontation. We don't like confrontation because it puts us in a spot where we're not accustomed to that as counselors. We're not trying to be confrontational with clients, but sometimes it's necessary. So there's some do's and don'ts and how that actually should work. And there was another point that just flew right out of my mind about that. My point with bringing conflict and confrontation into the counseling relationship is that you can't, if you're staying with those surface level conversations, as I mentioned in one of the slides, if you're staying at surface level conversations, if your client's not doing any of the work that they said that they wanted to do or accomplishing the things they wanted to accomplish, then we're ethically doing our clients a massive disservice. We're not practicing ethically, right? If we're just allowing our clients to come meet with us, pay for the service that we're providing, but yet not facilitating a process of change, that's not practicing ethically as a counselor. So remember that always as well. And so part of the function of confrontation and calling out discrepancies is to help move our clients forward. So there's a client change scale that the text talks about. I added another one to the module that's from motivational interviewing. And so MI has been around for quite some time. I think we've seen a little bit more of a resurgence just as a result of the opioid crisis. And and the MI was just kind of founded for use with recovery populations. So there are a number of different change scales out there. One of the discussions you're going to be looking at client change scale, and I want you to be proposing just a mock client, make up a little story about a fake person that you can imagine would be in your office, and kind of use this slide 10 as your guide. Okay, so if you're using the client change scale, it's got 5 stages, right? And so I want you to say, at stage 1, my fake client was in denial because they could not see that there was an issue with the fact that they were drinking 6 beers a night every single night. And so take me through all of that, kind of process the actual client change scale and what it might look like for your fake client that you have made up, okay? And then on slide 12, this is just practice for you. If we were in person, we'd be doing it as a group collectively. I'm not changing it. I want to leave it. But for your practice on slide 12, just go through. I've got 5 different examples. And so you just want to examples of what a client might be saying to you as the counselor. And so I want you to just put in there which stage you think that client might be at. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can number them. And I need some type of reminder from somebody, probably at some point, to post the answers to this to see if you got it right. I would try to remember that myself. So that's, I think, pretty much all I wanted to say about kind of the first part of day 2. So this is the first part. I've kind of chunked the day into different sections. I'll do little lecturettes, if you will, for each one. So the first one, we're talking about confrontation, resistance, stages of change, and the like. So with that, we're just gonna keep moving it on. So touch base on the discussion board, and then we'll get into chapters 13 and 14 next.